This is the Harmon Hotel. MGM spent $275 million to build the most expensive tower in American history on the Las Vegas Strip. It never opened. It was taken apart by hand floor by floor over 14 months. One bar of steel in the wrong place. Gone. How does the most expensive privately funded construction project end up structurally compromised before a single guest checks in? What does it take for 62 official safety reports to certify a building as compliant when some were signed before the inspector reached the site? Who approved the men responsible for certifying a $275 million tower, and did anyone actually verify their credentials? And when a building is too dangerous to stand but too surrounded to bring down, what happens to the people whose signatures made it possible? To understand what happened to the Harmon Hotel, the story has to start with what was being built around it. CityCenter was not a development project that happened to be large. It was a purpose-built construction apparatus, layers of contracts assigned roles, and divided legal liability assembled specifically to manage a project of unprecedented scale. 67 acres on the Las Vegas Strip, 6 towers rising simultaneously from a single continuous pour. A casino, a retail pavilion, 2,400 residential units, all of it built at the same time, on the same site by the same machine. At peak construction, 9,000 workers reported to the site every day, more people than live in some American towns. The concrete pours ran around the clock. The budget was $8.5 billion. It was the largest privately financed construction project in the history of the United States. For the centerpiece tower, the one that would anchor the south end of the site and face the Strip directly, MGM Mirage, one of the largest casino operators in the world, called Norman Foster. Foster & Partners. His London-based architecture firm had rebuilt the Reichstag Dome in Berlin. They had designed 30 St. Mary Acts in London, the tower everyone calls the Gherkin. Foster had won the Pritzker Prize, the Nobel equivalent of architecture. His firm was designing what would become Apple Park in Cupertino. His design for the Harmon was specific and deliberate. An oval footprint. Blue glass in a checkerboard pattern that shifted with the angle of the sun. At 49 stories, it would hold 400 hotel rooms, 207 luxury condominiums, a spa, and a sky bar at the top with views across the basin to the Spring Mountains. From certain approaches on the Strip, it looked less like a building than like a vertical lens, something that collected light rather than blocked it. In 2006, Terry Lanny, then CEO of MGM Mirage, told the press that Las Vegas was on the fast track to becoming a major urban center in the western United States. That was the plan. Here's what actually happened. A link beam is a short reinforced concrete element that connects 2 structural wall segments on either side of a door or window opening. Think of it like the shock absorbers on a car. On a smooth road, you would never know they were there, but the moment the road drops away, they are the only thing keeping the frame from slamming into the axle. In a high-rise, an earthquake is that drop. The link beam is the absorber. Get the steel inside wrong, and when the ground moves, it cannot do its job. To do that, the rebar inside must be placed exactly where the engineer specified. Get the steel wrong, and the concrete encasing it fails with it. In July 2008, engineers from Clark County, the local government authority responsible for building safety in the Las Vegas area, arrived at the Harmon with the permitted structural drawings. They walked the floors. On 15 of the 22 completed floors between the 6th and 20th stories, the rebar did not match the drawings. Bars in the wrong positions, wrong sizes. In some locations, absent entirely. The concrete had already been poured over most of them. The steel was now sealed inside hardened stone. On several floors, the misplaced rebar had protruded through the surface of the slab. Workers had taken a blowtorch to it, cutting the steel flush with the floor so it would not show. That detail matters. This was no longer a drafting error on a set of plans. It was now part of the building, buried, hardened, and each floor had failed differently from the last. The figures were then released. On a project this size, Clark County could not rely on the general contractor to verify its own work. So a third-party inspection firm was required, approved by the county, hired to stand on the floor, hold the permitted structural drawings against what had actually been built, and sign a document that entered the public record. Those signatures were not administrative paperwork. They were the system telling the public we looked, and the critical elements inside this building are safe. The firm Clark County approved for the Harmon was Converse Consultants. Between March and July of 2008, Converse filed 62 such daily inspection reports on the Harmon. Each one stated that the reinforcing steel had been examined and found in substantial compliance with the approved structural drawings. Then the investigation found something else entirely. Some reports were signed before the inspector reached the site. Some certified work that had not yet occurred on the day they were dated. Steel wrong on 15 floors. Report said compliant. 62 times. Ron Lynn, Clark County's Director of Development Services, confirmed to the Las Vegas Review-Journal there were 62 reports that later proved to be incorrect. And while the investigation into the Harmon was already underway, Converse retained active inspection contracts on the neighboring towers inside CityCenter. The Mandarin, the Veer, the Vdara. Same firm, same county approval. Different buildings, same site. Then it gets worse. The inspectors behind the signatures. The inspector whose name appeared on those reports was Scott Edberg, one of 2 Converse employees assigned to the Harmon. Clark County had approved him as a qualified rebar inspector. His resume was on file at the county. That resume listed no dates of attendance at any school, no educational degrees, no employer names, no project locations. Under any standard procedure, those gaps would trigger at minimum a single verification call before approving someone to certify structural safety on a $275 million high-rise. Clark County made no such call. A county spokesman later confirmed the county does not routinely verify information on inspector resumes before granting approval. A county inspector speaking anonymously to the Las Vegas Sun in a 2009 Pulitzer-winning investigation put it plainly, if the information is on the resume, the county does not follow up. Third parties falsify credentials regularly. They do it all the time. The second Converse inspector on the Harmon was Joseph Laurante. He later told county officials that the Harmon was the first job on which he had ever read structural engineering plans without assistance from another inspector, despite holding a civil engineering degree. 2 inspectors, 62 reports, 15 floors of incorrect steel. These were the 2 men whose signatures Clark County accepted as proof the building was being built correctly. And here's the part nobody wants to answer. The tower that had to come down by hand. In 2011, MGM retained Weidlinger Associates, a structural engineering firm based in New York, with decades of experience in high-rise safety assessment. To answer one question, could the Harmon be saved? Weidlinger's conclusion was not technical, it was final. The defects were not localized or uniform, they were distributed across 15 different floors, each set different from the last, each one sealed inside hardened concrete that would have to be demolished to access the steel. Repairing a single floor meant rebuilding it from the inside out at height, inside an occupied complex. There was no fix. The building could not be imploded either. Implosion requires cleared ground for a debris radius. The Harmon sat with the Cosmopolitan on one side, Aria on another, and active pedestrian traffic on the strip directly adjacent. A traditional implosion in that footprint was not an engineering question, it was a geometric impossibility. MGM's own structural engineer testified in open court that a magnitude 7.7 earthquake within the documented probability range for the Las Vegas basin would bring the building down. Meanwhile, 88 of the 207 people who had placed 20% deposits on Harmon condominiums were told their units would never be built. They were offered refunds or transfers to other CityCenter properties. They had signed contracts for homes inside a building that would instead be taken apart piece by piece. So the building came down by hand. Workers appeared behind a black mesh shroud at the top of the 28th floor and began removing the structure floor by floor from the top down in reverse construction sequence. 14 months. $11.5 million to undo what $275 million had built. MGM paid Perini Building Company, the general contractor responsible for overseeing all construction on the site, $153 million to settle. Perini paid MGM $11 million back. Insurance covered roughly $85 million more. No criminal charges were filed, not for the 62 falsified inspection reports, and not for anything else connected to the Harmon Hotel. The cleared lot sold in 2021 for $80 million, roughly 30 cents for every construction dollar spent on the tower above it. A 4-story open-air retail mall opened on the site in April 2023, and the inspection system that made it possible is still certifying construction in Clark County today. Scott Edberg was removed from Clark County's approved inspector list. Joseph Lorente was reassigned to soil inspections. Converse Consultants was suspended from taking new contracts in Clark County for 6 months while retaining the contracts it already held. Ron Lynn, Clark County's Director of Development Services, told the Las Vegas Review-Journal, "We do not see this very often. They installed it wrong. That's the bottom line." That was the county's public accounting of what happened. In June 2021, Champlain Tower South, a 12-story oceanfront condominium in Surfside, Florida, collapsed at 1:22 in the morning while residents were asleep. 98 people died. A 2018 engineering report by Morabito Consultants, a structural engineering firm hired to assess the building, had warned management of significant structural deterioration, major cracking and spalling in load-bearing columns and walls. A Surfside town inspector told residents the building was sound the following month. By 2021, the repairs had not been made. Federal investigators at NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, later found that misplaced rebar had been causing column cracking since the building was completed in 1981. The Harmon defects were caught before the building opened. The Surfside defects were not caught until the building was gone. One difference in outcome, the same failure in the system underneath. The paperwork said, safe. Nobody went back to check. Nobody who approved those inspection reports at the Harmon is being asked to justify that decision today. The Harmon is gone. But the model that built it, third-party inspectors approved without verification signing reports for floors they may not have walked, is not a Las Vegas problem. You just don't know which building in your city is running on the same system. The project you just watched took years to fail publicly. The next one on this channel took longer and cost more. Subscribe because by the time it makes the news, it's already too late. Comments are open. Name your city.